It started with something you couldn't quite name, an invisible shift in the air, like the tremor before an earthquake. I was mid-conversation with a client in the lobby when the atmosphere changed. Every instinct in my body braced itself for impact. Then the moment exploded. The heavy double doors slammed open so violently they bounced against the walls, commanding the attention of every soul in the room. Conversation halted. Heads turned. Silence swallowed the space. And there she stood, Karen Miller. She wasn't just a woman stepping into a room. She was a storm wearing heels. HOA president, building manager, self-appointed queen of control, and the terror of both our neighborhood and this office. Her expression wasn't just furious. It was victorious, like she'd finally reached the moment she'd rehearsed 1,000 times in her head. She strode across the polished marble floor, heels clicking with militaristic precision. Her perfectly manicured finger aimed squarely at me like a weapon. "You're fired. Effective immediately," she announced, voice ringing out across the lobby like a shot. Even the building manager behind the front desk flinched. "Pack your things and leave my building within the hour." Heat rushed up my neck. Every eye in the room turned to me. Clients, colleagues, even the guy from the coffee cart froze mid-pour. Some looked confused, others embarrassed for me. I could hear the whispers, feel the judgment, but I stayed calm. Karen stood there like a villain who thought the battle was already won, arms crossed, a smug smirk curving across her face. She was gloating, relishing every ounce of what she thought was my public downfall. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that she was already standing in my building. I took a slow breath, straightened my spine, and met her glare without a hint of fear. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, Karen." Her eyes narrowed, that smugness tightening into venom. "The only misunderstanding," she hissed, "is you thinking you were ever good enough to work here. Your performance has been pathetic. Get out before I call security." 6 weeks ago, I was just another modest financial advisor. No corner office, no flashy title, just someone who loved helping people plan their futures. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. It mattered, unfortunately. So did Karen. She didn't just rule over our neighborhood with HOA tyranny. She also managed the building we worked in. That meant she had control over both where I lived and worked. Karen thrived on domination. She controlled everything: thermostats, bathroom schedules, parking assignments. She sent out daily policy memos like she was running a military compound. Cross her? You'd find a violation notice on your door or an HR write-up on your desk. I'd watch talented co-workers quit just to escape her grasp. But I stayed, because something had changed. 2 months earlier, my uncle had passed away and left me a significant inheritance. Not lottery money, but enough to start over. I didn't buy a car. I didn't move across the country. I made a decision. I wanted something lasting, something that would outlive Karen's ego. When I found out this very office building was quietly up for sale, it felt like the universe had handed me the perfect weapon. I formed a holding company to mask my identity, kept my head down, played along, and made my offer. It was accepted. The deal closed the following week. Not a soul knew. Karen's behavior intensified. She sent out employee etiquette reminders every day, installed new cameras pointing at our desks. And she doubled down on HOA absurdities, too. One of our neighbors, Mrs. Peterson, a 70-year-old widow, was fined $500 for planting the wrong color flowers. The woman wept on her porch. That was the moment I knew Karen needed to be removed from power. For good. Just last week, she cornered me in the break room and sneered, "This isn't some low-rent operation. Maybe if you had an ounce of professionalism, you wouldn't still be rotting away in that tiny office." I smiled politely and said nothing. That very morning, I had signed the final ownership papers. I was the landlord now. And today, while she screamed and smirked in front of my clients, giddy with a supposed victory, I calmly gathered my files and stood up. "Sorry for the interruption." I told my clients with a quiet smile. "Shall we reschedule for tomorrow?" They nodded, still confused, and left. Karen stepped closer, voice low and laced with venom. "I've waited so long for this moment. You're nothing. No drive, no vision. You're just a placeholder, and people like me, we step over you on our way to the top. I didn't blink. You might be surprised, Karen. Then I turned and walked away, calm, unhurried, and pulled out my phone. Loud enough for her to hear, I spoke into the receiver. Hey, James. Yes, everything went through. The building is officially mine as of this morning. Go ahead and prep the new management notices for distribution tomorrow. Thanks. And just like that, the woman who had spent years tearing others down stood paralyzed in the middle of the lobby, realizing, far too late, that she just tried to fire her new boss. I ended the call and glanced back, my eyes catching Karen's frozen expression. Her mouth was slightly open, but no words came out. She stood there, speechless, as the full weight of the situation sank in. The next morning, I arrived early, accompanied by my new property management team. We swiftly posted notices across every floor. It was official. Smith Properties now owned Oakwood Professional Center. The building had a new owner, and all inquiries should be directed to David Williams, the new building manager. At precisely 9 a.m., I was seated in the surveillance room, watching the new security monitors as Karen arrived. She approached the front doors and swiped her access card. Red light. She tried again, frustration mounting, but still, the doors wouldn't budge. Then came the inevitable, pounding on the glass. David, the building manager, walked over to her, pointing at the posted notice. She read it, and her face twisted in disbelief. David opened the door to speak with her, but Karen brushed him off, ignoring his attempts to calm her down. She stormed toward her office, but when she reached the door, she tried to turn the knob. It didn't move. The locks had been changed. By now, a small crowd of employees had gathered, eager to witness the spectacle. Karen's face twisted with rage as she spun on the group, shouting, "Where is he? Where is that little nobody who thinks he can play games with me?" I stepped forward, calmly walking off the elevator. "Good morning, Karen," I said, my voice even. I believe David already explained the change in management. She laughed, but it wasn't the laugh of a confident woman. It was hollow, frantic, laced with panic. You bought this building? You drive a 10-year-old Honda? I believe in living below my means, I replied, maintaining my calm. But that's irrelevant. Smith Properties is my holding company. I purchased the building last week. The transfer became official yesterday morning, about an hour before you tried to fire me. Her face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. This is a joke. You can't do this. I've run this building for 7 years. I'll sue you for wrongful termination. I calmly handed her a card. You can contact my legal team. We've already compiled documentation on your management practices, staff complaints, security footage. It's all there. Her hands trembled with fury. Her eyes burned with rage. Effective immediately, your position is terminated. Please vacate the premises. Your belongings will be packed and delivered to you. The moment the words left my mouth, she snapped. She screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice cracking with venom. She began knocking over chairs, swearing at anyone who dared to look her way. In a fit of violent anger, she grabbed a potted plant and hurled it across the lobby. It crashed against the wall, just narrowly missing an elderly client who had been walking in. Then she lunged at the front desk, knocking the receptionist's computer off the counter with a wild, forceful shove. "This is my building," she shrieked, her face twisted in a grotesque mask of fury. "You're all fired, every single one of you." David quickly called security. I stepped forward, trying to de-escalate the situation. "Karen, please stop. You're only making things worse." She spun around, her eyes wide with madness. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her voice filled with hysteria. "I'm still the HOA president. I'll find you for every weed in your yard. I'll make your life a living hell." When security arrived, trying to calm her down, Karen slapped one of the guards across the face. That was the final straw. David immediately called the police. Within minutes, officers arrived and attempted to speak with her, trying to restrain the chaos. But Karen was far beyond reason. She barricaded herself behind the desk, still yelling threats at anyone within earshot. When she tried to shove past the officers to get to me, they had no choice but to physically restrain her. She was handcuffed and informed she was being arrested for destruction of property, disorderly conduct, assault, and trespassing. The building fell into a stunned silence as she was dragged out, still struggling and screaming, her face contorted with rage. The following week, Karen stood before a judge in court. Her excuse for her actions? A mixture of denial and deflection. The judge, clearly unimpressed with her tantrums, sentenced her to 100 hours of community service and ordered her to pay $7,000 in damages. As if that weren't enough, he issued a restraining order. Karen was no longer allowed to come within 100 feet of the building or have any contact with any of the employees. But the final blow came shortly after. The HOA board, with footage of her meltdown circulating among the neighbors, held an emergency meeting. The decision was swift and unanimous. Karen was removed as president of the HOA. When they delivered the news, Karen didn't scream. She didn't shout. She sat down slowly, her face drained of all expression, her mouth open and closed. But for the first time in her life, there was nothing to say. The woman who had ruled with an iron fist, whose very name had struck fear into the neighborhood, had been silenced. And I couldn't help but smile.